mä oon teitä Radio Robin Hoodi.
And a very good afternoon to you and welcome to Conversation Oasis. This is the weekly free-flowing talk program here on Radio Robin Hood, which comes to you from the Kasviskeidas restaurant here in the centre of Turku. My name is David Mawby. I'm the host and trying to keep people in order here, which is impossible because we are joined as usual by our host who is...
It's Jalal. But it's interesting. It's impossible because we are joined by Jalal, the host. What did you mean by that?
Well, we'll soon find out.
Okay.
But we also have our two other participants today. Jonas from Kuopio, who is studying economics.
Yes.
From an interesting perspective. Maybe we come on to that in a moment. And we're also joined by someone who's kind of a regular here from the moment, that he's Eero from Aura, studying comparative religion. And
yes,
I think that
but
was
from Eura.
from
Yeah.
Aura. Aura, of course, is different. Yes,
Yes.
Aura's just it's just a few old stations up the line towards Tampere. But Aura is, of course, to the south of Pori. If we get our geography correct.
Exactly.
Now, we have agreed in advance to talk about how quick we should progress on the path to globalization. Do we really want globalization to proceed? I'll start off with Jonas.
I would like, before going into the topic, I would like to perhaps correct a bit. I was born in Kuopio, but we moved out around when I was like 2 or something. So perhaps I'm mostly from Turku though. Okay, minor detail.
Yeah,
Anyhow,
spoken like a true Turku person. Yes. Do carry on.
Thank you. So I think when it comes to globalization, I just read this very interesting article which had ideas I had never heard before. Before I had only heard this very positive talk about globalization and how it's just good and so forth, and only these kind of, perhaps like, how do you say, people who are not so progress-minded, but instead like, how do you say that when you're...
Reactionary.
Perhaps,
yes.
Yeah,
Conservative.
Regressive, conservative, something like this, that they just don't kind of understand the greatness of globalization and they're just scared of new things and so forth. So these were the thoughts and ideas I had heard before, but then I read this article by Thomas Wahlgren, who is, I think, he has a PhD, I believe, in philosophy at the University of Helsinki. I hope I got it correct. However, he had this article where he pointed out that there is, or he claimed that there is a dimension to globalization that none of the contemporary political parties take into account, and in that they are actually taking or they're working kind of schizophrenically, in the sense that while they are kind of they are saying that they are driving the interests of say the labor force and the Finn and so forth, and at the same time they are going in for the globalization. But what he pointed out is that the money follows power, and with the globalization and European Union, we are actually giving the power to some far away kind of centralized place, and it's unclear how that actually serves the say Finn or the labor force of.
By the
of
Finn you mean the
Finland.
Finnish people?
Yeah. The Finn. So
the Finns, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how we are now seeing that the contemporary elite or global elite is perhaps the financial people, the people working with finances, those who work at the European Union, the say bureaucrats or the kind of global elite who don't actually anymore have such a home country, but they are kind of having the globe as their home country, and so in a sense, through European Union, the power is given to them. Yeah. And actually not and away from those who are not them, part of that.
And if I come here on this, I mean, so there are so many Finnish companies that have been sold abroad and have then been sold on to investment companies that are in the hands of a mystical few. There are Finnish companies that were once part of the infrastructure, that controlled the infrastructure of this country, electricity, for instance, the very airwaves that we are using for this broadcast, now owned by Australian investment companies, and we have absolutely no power over them whatsoever. I challenge the concept, though, that globalization is something that everyone wants. No, I don't believe that for a moment. There are aspects to globalization that we do want. Yes, that we can get on an aeroplane and travel anywhere with a minimum of fuss, and that we can buy things if we want to from other countries through the internet. We love that part of it. But there are other things that we can't stand when we lose our jobs. This is what America is facing at the moment. That when ordinary people, and there still are a lot of ordinary people about, may I remind you, who lose their jobs because of globalization and new liberalistic economics.
But David, I think first we don't need just globalization to lose the jobs or to have people unemployed. We have robots, machines coming. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't need to have that. But I have one question for you, Jonas. We know that every cultural change, every political change needs its own tools, and also it has its own consequences. So it's not a single thing happening, like we take the border and we say that there is globe. So, but we need, for every change, we need other things to come first, to happen, and then in the end, globalization is a consequence of the other changes. Like we should be economically ready for that. We should culturally be ready for that. So, in order to make that happen, so first we should also move forward culturally. It's not just say that now we take the border and this gives the power to multinational companies or the international government, which is included of elites, the board elites. But I think we change a lot of other things before that thing to happen. And one of the things that I think we need is economical change. And so I think the banking system, insurance system, and all these financial institutions have to be updated.
Yeah, they don't brought into public ownership.
Yeah,
exactly.
They don't really function in order to help human to evolve.
Do like they did in Iceland. Yes, put the bankers who have cost us so much money in prison, and then nationalise the banks. You've got it in one. I never knew you could play golf so well.
But I think this is the normal way to evolve or to make changes happen.
I don't think you quite want it the way I want it somehow, and that I would like to see the banks in public ownership. And not in private hands.
Well, I don't want any bank at all.
Well, exactly. Even better still. Yes.
Yeah, but it has to. We cannot just take the bank away from human life. So it needs its own way to. In the end, we get rid of it, but it needs its own way to change.
Yes. Some thoughts on globalization from your perspective, Eero?
Yeah. Well, first of all. I think there's a lot of fluctuation. What do we mean by the concepts? Yeah. Wahlgren has his own idea. Jalal has his own, and David, Jonas has their own ideas, and it's for what it seems to me, it's like we talk a lot about globalization, and we used to talk it even more. But you know, I think it's a concept that it maybe even makes things more obscure than they really are, and a good way to hide important changes and processes. For what you told about the Wahlgren's article, Jonas, and what you just, Jalal, described, I think they're just totally on a different level, you know. And,
yeah. I mean, I think that globalization is the result of free market economies. Of being allowed, where businesses can do exactly what they want without any recall to any authority whatsoever, in the name of free trade, and damn the consequences. Don't even think about the consequences. And I think also the problem, the reason we have so many environmental questions unanswered is that the politicians haven't got the guts to stand up to the big corporations and say, look, you cannot go on ruling the world like this, because we will have
part of it.
Soon we'll have no planet left.
But they are part of it, David.
They are part of it. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yes, they're in the same boat that's sinking fast.
They all have some second job in this.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Yes.
So why do they call it globalization? Why is it so? Why does it have that positive?
I think it's sold to us as being positive because there are fringe benefits, as I mentioned. Yeah. We can travel fairly freely within the European Union. Of course, if you have a darker skin, then then that's a different story altogether. Sad to say. And also we can buy things freely. It's a trade thing. It's a money making thing. It'll always be a money making thing.
Ideological.
Yeah. That's the problem with globalization. But we also have globalization of culture now, and I have to admit to being a bit of a prophet of this by default, because so much of the popular culture in Europe is very much the same. For instance, just before we came on air, we were talking about the power of the Swedish music industry. Well, before the Swedish music industry, which gave us ABBA and so on, we had the British music industry, and we still have it. That is cultural globalization.
So what is Europe for you? Is Turkey in Europe or not? Is Moldavia in Europe or not? So, but when you look, if they are in Europe, then it's not the same culture anymore.
I have to confess that whenever I watch the weather report on the Euronews channel, and they scan across the map of Europe, as soon as they go past Turkey, I often shout at the camera, "That's not Europe." Oh. But when they go towards some Kazakhstan, I thought, that's not Europe, that's Asia. Or when they go scan across North Africa.
But on the geography, what we have learned in the school, these are all a part of geography of Europe, not Kazakhstan, but Turkey, part of Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia.
Not when I went to school. The border was the Ural Mountains, which
Ural Mountains are in the middle of Russia.
Yes. That was the extreme of Europe. But then it was none of the former Soviet states of Georgia and in that part of the world. They were never considered. We were never taught that they would be part of Europe. They were part of Eurasia.
How about Albania?
Oh, Albania is Europe. Albania is Europe.
Perhaps a distinction between geographical, like continental plates, and the cultural.
Yes, exactly.
Is perhaps
it may
useful.
Be.
But I'm afraid I need to go now to work.
But
thanks for joining us, Jonas, and for your contribution. I might like to remind you that this is Conversation Oasis, coming to you from the Kasviskeidas restaurant here in the centre of Turku. There are three of us, myself, David Mawby, and we also have Jalal here, who is the host, and we also have our regular here, Erum, who is a student here at the University of Turku, studying comparative religion. Globalization is something that we can talk about we can even pontificate, we can preach about it, but I'm not so sure there's much that we can do about it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, please.
Actually, I would like to return to that you said earlier about the music and you know, how maybe globalization had this. While we talk about the multitude of cultures and stuff like that, you know but it may, is that really what happens, or is it just making it more monotonic and like monoculturalization? You know, like
there is that danger that minority cultures, due to size, are shall we say put down, whereas the mass culture, whatever that is now, is the
that
one
becomes the global culture.
Like for instance, in the film industry, we for so long we were taught that Hollywood is the number one, unfortunately, but luckily the Finnish film industry has shown that even smaller countries can have a tremendous role to play in the arts. Regardless of geographical or even population size.
But regarding what you said, David, that is that really is there anything that we can do about it? I think the things are happening whether we want it or not, and this is happening too. And to think about what is negative with it or positive, everything has two sides. So some negative, some positive. But what we can do is just when we work on something, we reduce the negative side of that happening. And this is what we can do, to work on this is going to happen and how we want that to happen. So by getting action, by participating in this globalization, we can reduce the negative side of it.
Yeah, but if you suppose that there's always something we can do in reaction to globalization or other strong political powers and global powers, I think there's this sense of so let everything come as they come. We always have a way to solve it, but I think that's a very dangerous idea, because somehow that justifies the human suffering, basically.
How do you see the link there?
Well, I don't know, but that's how I see it. You know, I feel it. Yeah.
And of course, it leads to these ideas that we should buy domestic produce. We should buy domestic things. As they say, suosi suomalaista, favor Finnish products, which isn't always possible. I think globalization we have to take in some ways as a kind of permanent fait accompli. It's here and it's here to stay, because communications, the way they are today, has changed beyond all our imagination.
And that's why we're having this conversation.
Yes, that's right.
And that's part of fighting back. And we are in a situation where
McLuhan was right that there would be a global village communications-wise back in the 1980s. But it's we turn on the television, we turn on the radio, and we're hearing voices from across the globe, whether we like it or not. Back in maybe 50 years ago, we had to search for those. Globalization is a fait accompli. And you're still listening to Conversation Oasis, coming to you from the Kasviskeidas restaurant here in the centre of Turku. You as a student, you have to fight to make ends meet. You have to, and I understand now that you've been a student for some years.
Too many years.
Too many years. Yeah. And this brings me on to the point that there have been over the years in Finland there's been this idea that university courses should be much shorter than they have been to date. I mean, it's 5 years before you get a decent degree, but it's whereas in the UK you can get by in 2 years if you really try hard. Would you like to see something like that in Finland?
Well,
I'm throwing.
Well, no, because I think part of the part of the idea of education is to find and knowing the things you want to learn. So if you make the education very short or schooling,
yes, education is.
Then I think it's people who come from lukio and from
high school, yes,
from high school to university. Well, very few know what they want to study, and many people change their subjects, and some take years off and like that. So,
did you know when you left high school what you wanted to study? All those years ago?
No, and actually, I was I went to high school after as an adult.
Right.
High school, yeah, kind of like that. But I think pretty soon I figured it out. So that it was religion, philosophy, cultural studies.
Yes, and that's why you're
I think what you
on the
mentioned,
road.
David, is about the efficiency of education system.
Yeah.
So I believe still education has to be free.
Yeah.
But there should be a deadline always when you graduate. So after that, if you want, so you have to pay it. But for the first 4 years or 5 years, it has to be free because we need to have all the potential of every citizen to be in use. So we cannot reduce some of and put some part of the society in isolation and to ignore them or to deprive them.
Yeah.
We need to have everybody participating in education system.
Yes.
But after 4 or 5 years, then everybody wants to stay there. So please, if you want to, pay for it.
Oh, what do you say about that? Well, you pay for it already. I mean, the idea of a free higher education in Finland, which is lauded across the continent, it's a farce.
Yeah.
I mean, no one gets a free university education in Finland, do they?
They do.
Do they?
Well, basically, it's very cheap.
It's very cheap. Yes.
Yeah.
I remember in the UK it was you got a student grant, and maybe 100 years ago you could survive on that if you were from a privileged background. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, one needs to eat, and the student grant is just too little for that.
How much do you know about the situation faced by students in other European countries? I mean, do you know that, for instance, it's becoming more and more difficult in Britain for students from ordinary working class backgrounds to actually get into university because of the cost?
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
In France,
but
it's
I don't know
absolutely
that.
free, isn't it? In France, it's absolutely free.
I do not have the facts to hand, so I can't say whether that's true. Let's hope so. And I think in Germany too, it would be. I think it's fairly easy. Yes. There was It brings me on to another point, though.
Probably it's because they don't have the House of Lords.
Yeah, but I think in France the universities there are so many different levels, so that it's possible to get a free education, but I don't know if it's any good, you know.
Well, the French education system used to have the reputation of being exceptionally strict, but it brings me to another point that I think we've had on this program before, but it's worth considering. That I watched a documentary on YLE Channel 1, and there's a plug for my former employer, was entitled "The Poor of Europe." And what it highlighted is that the level of youth unemployment in most European countries, especially in the south, is phenomenally high. I mean, over half of the, let's say about half of Spanish young people are unemployed. The rates seem to be in other countries around 30%. In Italy too. And I guess it's not so bad here anymore. But it always saddens me that when people go into higher education, today the demand is to think about in advance, well, I'd like to study this, but will I ever get a job that I can use this qualification for, especially if I'm going to end up serving in a restaurant, for example, as many graduates do.
David, we should know why there is this difference between South and North, and I think the reason is culture, and what is in that culture is corruption.
Oh yes.
And that's why I said that in education system we need also to learn what is the benefit of transparency and not to be corrupted, and everybody benefited in the end. But in South still it's like culturally they haven't moved on with this part of the culture to learn the transparency is helping everybody, system and country and every citizen. And corruption, unemployment is due to corruption.
Exactly, this is what this particular documentary program highlighted, and I think the one very stark example was that of southern Italy, where they have the same sort of employment programs as we have here in Finland, but youths are sent for job training but never get paid because the money has been allocated behind their backs to some other thing by some official who's obviously put it on, maybe put it in their back pocket or something. And my own experience of Southern Europe has been that corruption is endemic across the board there. It is the culture, sad to say.
Yeah, I read, for example, the European money for the refugees going to Southern European country, but the money disappearing. It doesn't get to refugees. Money goes to health system in Italy. Money disappears. It doesn't get to health system. So it's a lot of these things are happening down there, and it seems that there is no that will to change. People easily turn against of Berlusconi, but next election they are pro Berlusconi, and the people, because it's a collective culture, and in that collective culture, people are influencing each other.
And Berlusconi owns lots of newspapers and television channels as well.
That's true.
So it's not like very much like what is right or what is wrong. It's what everybody follows. I follow.
Absolutely.
Also media, powerful media, and the one who has power over media.
I think that's about it, folks, for today. I thank you for your contributions. We've been joined by Eero here from the University of Turku, and thank you, Jalal, for your insights as well. We're going to be back at these same times next week with another edition of Conversation Oasis, and we live in hope that this warmer weather will continue and that we can get out and about and get some inspiration, because it has been frigging cold this last week. So until we meet again, may I wish you a very warm week ahead. Thank you.